Has Nikon been doing something quietly behind the scenes? Let's talk about it. Hey, welcome to another video. I want to do a few things in this video. And number one, I've been a little tardy in putting out the monthly photo of the month, where I show some images from my subscribers who want to just show one of their images. It's not a critique. They just send me a photo and I put it in the proper format and stick it in a video so that they can have one of their images shown. You're welcome to do it. Just shoot me off an email and I'll tell you how to get the image to me, and you're welcome to join in. This month we have 2 new people joining, so welcome. I also want to talk a little bit about some observations that I've seen out of Nikon. Again, I don't know anyone from that company. I don't have any inside information. There are people on YouTube that I'm sure know more what's going on from the inside than I do. This is purely my observation. You can call it speculation, but just something that I've noticed. And I want to tie it into why I think it's important when you buy photography gear. In my opinion, the bottom line should be that you can watch all the YouTube videos you want, take any advice that you want, toss out any advice that you don't want to listen to. However, the bottom line to me has always been, in my opinion, to listen to your own gut. You yourself know what's better and what's best for you, because you know the type of photographer you are. For example, I've mentioned this a few times for people that watch a lot of my videos, in that when I was going to go from the Nikon Z850 and I knew I wanted to change over to the mirrorless systems, I looked at the Sonys, I looked a little bit at the Leica, I looked at the Fujis. I didn't really pay too much attention to the Canons, just because. It has nothing against Canon. They're all fine companies. They all make great cameras. However, they're all, in my opinion, a little different in what they do, and maybe even what market they go after. And you have to be careful when people on YouTube, whether it's me or whoever, say, well, you should shoot this or you shoot that. First of all, you'll never hear me say, you should shoot this brand and stay away from that brand, or shoot this lens and stay away from that lens. It's not my business what you shoot. I don't care what camera brand you use. It makes no difference to me, right? I only care about what I use. So I come from a position of, I'm not trying to sell you anything when I have these conversations with you. I don't have affiliate links. I don't have sponsors. So I have no reason to try to push you one way or another. Keep in mind that there are people on YouTube, photographers, who will try to push you into a particular brand, and they're being paid to do so. Sometimes they'll tell you, sometimes they won't. I think now most of the times it's hard for them to get away with not telling you, so that they'll tell you that, hey, I'm sponsored by, or whatever, so that you have an idea. What I'm trying to say is, don't get pushed into something because, well, John Jones or whoever uses that brand, and I want to have images as good as John Jones. Now, I know you know this, but don't fall for it. And I'm trying to get to a long-winded point here, and what I think Nikon is doing behind the scenes. When I thought about using the different brands, the first brand that I probably kicked out was Leica because I did listen to people who love Leica, and they would tell you that it's not for everyone. Now, me personally, I like to photograph a lot of different subjects and a lot of different things. I like sports. I like shooting birds. I like shooting my grandkids. I shoot some portraits. I shoot landscapes. I like to travel with my camera. And so a lot of them would tell you that that's not Leica. And that's really the reason why, and probably the cost, was the reason why I kicked that one out. When I was looking to switch to go to mirrorless, there's no question Sony was ahead of Nikon. It's probably hard to dispute that. Their camera bodies at the time for mirrorless were superior to Nikon. And some might argue they still are, and same for Canon. I don't know. Again, I have nothing against Canon. I'm not as familiar with them as I might be with the Nikons, the Sonys, the Fujis, and the Leicas. I just haven't researched them, the Canons, nearly as much. So it's nothing against Canon. So whatever I say, don't think that I'm against a Canon shooter, because I'm not. Anyway, the point was that I seriously considered Sony. And there were a lot of people on YouTube at the time that were really pushing the Sonys. And I had to think deep down in my gut that for whatever reason, I've just always been loyal to Nikon. And I heard the rumors, which seemed to be false. There were a few people on YouTube who were claiming Nikon's going bankrupt. They're going to get out of the camera business. They're not going to make any new lenses. Don't get into their mirrorless system. Blah, 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 blah. Well, I think that's been proven wrong. And that's what I mean by don't always listen to people on YouTube, including me. I'm sure I say things that people don't agree with. But my gut told me, for the type of photographer I was, to just wait it out and stay with Nikon. So I did. So I waited past the original versions of the Z6 and Z7, and I waited for the Z7II to come out, which is what I'm using right now to record this. And I kept a lot of my F mount glass and sold it off a little bit here and there and switched over to the Z glass. And by the time the Z8 came out, I had the Z glass that I wanted that could match up with my Z8. And so my gut told me to go that way, and I think for me personally, I made the right decision. I'm usually one who sometimes overanalyzes things. I have an accounting degree, a business background. So sometimes I overanalyze things, rather than just going out and doing something. But when you're spending this kind of money, you want to make sure that you make the right decision. There are several people on YouTube that change camera brands every time the wind changes, which is getting to my point. Everybody, maybe in around 2020, 2021, was really down on Nikon. Oh, you got to go to Fuji. You got to go to Sony. You got to be a Canon guy. Look out for that Leica Q2. Boy, that's some camera. And I came close to going to the Fuji 50R or 50S. I forget which one it was. But what stopped me was, A, it was heavier and the lenses were heavier, and I'm not getting any younger. And B, as good as those camera bodies are, and as good as those lenses are, they didn't suit my all-around needs. So I'm glad that I made the decision to stay with Nikon. What I've noticed behind the scenes, if you look at the big name channels that do photography, I realize that you might be saying now, oh, well, it's only because you watch Nikon channels. Not true. I watch a lot of different photographers on YouTube, and I enjoy a lot of different photographers on YouTube who shoot different brands. I watch a lot of the Leica guys because I really enjoy some of the things that they photograph. You know, they're very good at portraits. I enjoy watching Matt Osborne, who pretty much exclusively shoots with Leica and does a lot of portraits. He's a very good photographer, and I really enjoy watching his channel. Paul Reed shoots almost exclusively with a Leica Q2 and does black and white, 99% black and white. And I really enjoy his channel. So it's not that I only watch Nikon channels and have observed what I think is going on behind the scenes right now. And that is that I think Nikon has figured out that they needed to get into the YouTube advertising field. Why do they say that? Who are some of the bigger channels? Thomas Heaton. Now, he shoots a lot of different brands, but he's primarily switched over to using a Nikon Z8 and Nikon lenses. And Nikon, through Thomas's own admission, has lent him lenses. And he doesn't promote any particular camera brand, but he'll tell you what he's photographing. Now, he'll still use a Fuji from time to time, and also he's got some film cameras and everything else. And that's another reason why I like watching Thomas, because he uses a lot of different cameras, digital and film. But he primarily uses his Z8 now. Nigel Danson was always a Nikon guy, but now Nikon had him do this large project. Now, I don't know if Nigel's actually a Nikon ambassador yet, but they're really giving him, when the new lens comes out, he's out there. I feel bad for him because he tries so hard to be honest, but he's like, well, it's a great lens, but, and he tries to, throw in the caveats of what may not make it the best lens. But you can tell he's loyal to Nikon, and they're sending him lenses to test out. You can just tell. And more power to him. He does try really hard. Some of the smaller channels, Russ and Laz, I enjoy watching them. They've pretty much been Nikon guys from the beginning. But they've also, one of them had a problem with one of his cameras, shipped it off, and Nikon didn't do a very good job of getting it back to him. And he was a little miffed about that, and I don't blame him. So he'll give you the bad side of Nikon as well. And that's why I enjoy watching him. He'll tell you all the warts, and he'll be honest about the lenses. But he also mentioned in a recent video that Nikon reached out and said, oh, we're not going to let that happen again. You just get a hold of us and we'll take care of you. Which I don't know they would have done in 2021. Jarrett Poland, the Fro, he was always a Nikon guy. And I don't know what happened, but he sold off all his Nikon gear. And I'm not even sure what he shoots with now, Sony, Canon. But all of a sudden now, he's reviewing a lot of Nikon glass again. And he's not poo-pooing Nikon as much as he was a couple of years ago. So they obviously got back in his ear. And he's a little bit more on the friendly side with Nikon than he was a couple of years ago. He, whatever reason, got away from him. Gary Goh, a British photographer, he was a Canon loyalist to the nth degree, or at least he came off that way. And all of a sudden, out of the blue, he's sponsored by Nikon. And he started using a Nikon Z8. And now he's doing videos using Nikon equipment. And he talked all the time about how he loved his Canon. And all of a sudden he switched to Nikon. That's not a coincidence. Something happened. Now there's the opposite. Alistair Ben, he was always a Nikon guy. Now he switched over to being a Fuji guy. But he's an honest guy. You know, he tells you why. He's also mostly a landscape guy. It's what he does. And if I was a 100% landscape guy like he was, I might be using the Fuji system as well. Matt Granger from Down Under. He used to call himself the Nikon guy. And all of a sudden he went away from Nikon. And I forget, I think he went to, I honestly don't remember whether it was Sony or Fuji or a combination of the two. And then recently in the past year, all of a sudden he's back with Nikon. And he's using his Nikon Z8. And he just did a big trip to Iceland and he took all Nikon glass and Nikon Z8s and Z9s. And again, I don't think that happened by coincidence. Mark Denny. I forget where he started. I think he might have been a Sony guy to begin with, and then he switched over to Fuji. And he was really not necessarily promoting Fuji, but he would just tell you what he used, what gear he used. And he seems to be, I don't know any of these people, but Mark comes across as being a sincere, honest guy, and he told you what he liked about the Fuji system. Out of the blue, in his last handful of videos, he's gotten rid of his Fujis and gone to a Nikon Z8 and using Nikon glass. Again, only Mark knows. Maybe a coincidence. Maybe Nikon saw that he had a big following and said, hey, why don't you go out to the Grand Tetons and take a Z8 with a couple of our lenses. The point is that a few years ago when I really thought about getting away from Nikon, I thought, I'm going to stay with them. Even though all the other channels, the big channels, were all switching to Sony and Fuji and where they were Canon guys and they were going to stay Canon guys and women. Now all of a sudden a lot of them are swaying back to Nikon. I find that interesting. I don't think that's a coincidence. I just don't. I think that Nikon has figured out a way to advertise through these different people. Now, I get nothing from Nikon. I'm not a big enough channel. They've never contacted me other than to send me a bill if I buy a lens. Okay? So, no. They're not paying me to say I shoot with their cameras. But I do find it curious that a lot of the big channels are now switching to Nikon. Just some thoughts, some observations. You can tell me what you think. Am I way off base? I don't know. Maybe one day all of a sudden they'll go back to Sony's or Fuji's. I know I make a joke occasionally about the yellow Shimoda bags. All of a sudden all the big channels in the same couple of weeks, all their videos, they were all wearing yellow Shimoda backpacks. Well, you know, Shimoda sent them all those backpacks to promote them. That was a lot more obvious than what I think Nikon is doing. So just pay attention to it. And in the end, you know what you like to photograph. You know the type of camera you need. You know your budget. And just stay with your gut. Don't worry about this guy shoots Fuji, so I have to get a Fuji. This guy shoots Sony. This guy shoots Leica. They all shoot what they shoot for their particular reasons. Sometimes it's financial. Sometimes it's because it really is the best camera system for them. And sometimes they can afford to switch camera systems. Just my thoughts and observations. Please watch a couple of my other videos and hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. I would appreciate it. I've noticed that if I ask for likes and subscribes, I get more than if I don't mention it. And I should know that because I used to be in sales, and they always say you have to ask for the deal, right? You have to ask for the sale. And I was always kind of reluctant. I was more of a soft kind of seller. That was my style, to just kind of soft pedal it and work my way into a deal. And sometimes you can't be that way on this channel. You just have to say, hey, hit like and subscribe. Please do it now. So please do it. All right. Thanks again. Hope you enjoyed some of the other people's images. If they had a name attached to it, obviously it's theirs. If there was no name attached to it, it's one of mine. Till next time, take good care. Please like and subscribe. All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.